Immediately after the end of the war in the autumn of 1945, the Belsen process began. The British military tribunal tried employees of Nazi concentration camps. Most of the creepy details of this case are still kept classified today. In addition, there were women at the trial. 12 of them received prison sentence from 5 to 10 years and only one was sentenced to death. A gorgeous young blonde, she was 21 years old, she sat through the entire trial with an ironic smile on her face. On the night before the execution, laughter and loud German songs could be heard from her cell. The executioners refused to believe that their beautiful young victim was worthy of such severe punishment. Before you continue watching, please subscribe to my channel and like it. Of course, this is optional, the main thing is to be sincere. Irma Grese, the future Nazi criminal, was born in 1923 in a family of German peasants. Irma's father was a supporter of National Socialism and supported the aggressive policy of Adolf Hitler when he came to power. In 1937, the girl's father joined the National Socialist German Workers' Party. In 1936, Irma Grese's mother committed suicide for unknown reasons. It was a very hard blow for Irma. At an early age, she was deprived of maternal care and was left with her father and 4 other siblings. Her mother's death affected her later life, and she was forced to drop out of school at the age of 15 to help her family. After school, Irma worked for a year in the Imperial Labor Service, then for some time she was interrupted by temporary earnings. For 6 months she worked on agricultural farms, for another 6 months in a shop in Lycan, after which she worked as a nurse in the Hohenlochen Sanatorium for 2 years. She applied to train as a nurse, but the labor exchange instead sent her to a dairy factory in Furstenberg. In 1942, the girl voluntarily joined the SS auxiliary units and became the Kriegshelferin SS. It is known that Irma's decision led to serious disagreements with her father, but she was firmly convinced of its correctness. According to the distribution, Irma Grese got into service in Ravensbrück, a famous women's concentration camp. There she underwent compulsory training, which made her a cruel and merciless monster. In the spring of 1943, Irma was transferred to Auschwitz, where her career rapidly took off. At the end of 1943, she was appointed senior warden. At that time, the girl was only 20 years old. All the prisoners of the concentration camp called Birkenau were in her power, but Irma Grese secretly dreamed of a movie star career, which she planned to do seriously after the end of World War II. The prisoners, who miraculously managed to survive the terrible Nazi torture, later told in detail about the outrages and crimes that Irma Grese did in Auschwitz. The captives called this woman differently, but most often the nickname the Blonde Devil sounded. In addition to physical violence against prisoners, Irma liked to use all kinds of psychological and emotional methods of punishment. Sometimes she shot prisoners randomly for no reason. For fun, Grese starved her dogs, and then fed them several prisoners. It was she who decided who and when was to go to the execution in the gas chamber, and her heavy whip left deep wounds on the bodies of exhausted people. It is worth noting that Irma Grese was a very attractive young person, so she was often credited with relationships with concentration camp commandants and sexual relations with other SS officers. The Western post-war press discussed Irma Grese's possible sexual deviations, her numerous connections with SS officers from the camp administration, with the commandant of the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, then Auschwitz Kampfführer Joseph Kramer, known as the Belsen Beast, as well as with Dr. Joseph Mengele. The reputation of a sadist and a nymphomaniac is firmly entrenched for Irma. The prisoner Olga Lengyel, in her memoirs 5 Chimneys, wrote that it was Grese who was engaged in the selection of women for gas chambers. At the same time, her choice fell not on the weak and useless prisoners, but on the most beautiful, those who could compete with the attractiveness of Irma Grese herself. The most surprising thing at the same time was that there were girls who, for some mysterious reasons, Irma sympathized with. These were members of the camp orchestra, who among other things, entertained the SS men with their music. One of its participants, Yvette Lennon, recalled how her sister got sick and she had to personally seek help from Irma Grese. And suddenly the matron expressed sympathy. She found Yvette a place in the kitchen and gave her sister extra rations so she could get back on her feet. The woman remained in Auschwitz until the evacuation on January 18, 1945, after which she supervised the transportation of prisoners to Ravensbrück. In March 1945, Ravensbrück was also at risk, so the SS Queen and most of the prisoners moved to Bergen-Belsen. On April 15, 1945, this concentration camp was handed over to the British Army. Irma Grese was among the 47 guards who did not want to give up without resistance. On April 17, she was arrested. At the time of the arrival of the British Army in Bergen-Belsen, there were about 60,000 survivors and more than 10,000 dead prisoners. The guards, including Irma Grese, were forced to dig mass graves for their victims. The trial of her and other representatives of the camp administration lasted 2 months. Irma Grese was found guilty and sentenced to death. The woman did not repent of anything. On her last night, Irma, along with the same monster, the warden Elisabeth Volkenrath, had fun and sang Nazi songs. Irma Grese was found guilty of crimes committed while serving in the women's units of Auschwitz and crimes in Bergen-Belsen, and sentenced to death by hanging along with 10 convicts. She pleaded not guilty. Her petitions for clemency were rejected. The sentence was carried out in Hamelin prison by the executioner Albert Pierpoint on December 13, 1945 at 10:03 a.m. Standing on the scaffold, she said to the executioner, "Hurry up." Albert Pierpoint later recalled, "We went up the stairs to the cells where the condemned were waiting. A German officer opened the door leading to the corridor, and we walked past a row of faces into the execution chamber. Irma Grese, I called. The German guards quickly closed all the bars on the 12 viewing holes and opened one of the doors. Irma Grese came out. The camera was too small for me to go inside, and I had to intercept it in the hallway. Follow me, I said in English, and Sergeant Major of the British Army Regiment Richard Anthony repeated the order in German. At 9:34 a.m., she entered the execution chamber, took a quick look at the officials standing around her, then headed to the center of the trap, where I made a chalk mark. She stood very firmly on this mark, and when I put a white bag on her head, she said in her languid voice, "Hurry up." She flew down, and the doctor followed me into the pit and pronounced her dead. At the time of her death, the girl was 22 years old. There is no grave of Grese. The cemetery where she was buried was liquidated in the 80s along with the prison building. There is evidence that in 1954 the bodies of those convicted by the Belsen Military Tribunal were reburied at the A.M. Well Cemetery in Hameln. This was done allegedly because the ghost of Irma Grese in 1948 began to disturb the prison guard. There is no confirmation of the mystical story. On their deathbed, many criminals of Hitler's Germany gave up and repented of what they had done. Irma Grese is an exception. Bullying the weak, of course, brought Irma Grese satisfaction, but she was not going to work in concentration camps all her life. After the Second World War, the SS Queen planned to make a dizzying career in cinema.